Donald Trump has now authorized ICE agents to make arrests of illegal aliens at churches and at schools. This new directive was announced by Acting Homeland Security Secretary Benjamin Huffman. It essentially empowers ICE agents to carry out arrests and enforcement actions in previously restricted so-called sensitive areas, such as the churches and schools. This change eliminates the long-standing policies that aimed to avoid enforcement in such locations. Which, if we're being honest with ourselves, all policies like that has done is to encourage those places to become safe havens for the criminal element to hide in. Now, CNN yesterday discussed this in an article that they published on their website. This is written by Priscilla Alvarez, who wrote, "Trump says ICE can arrest people at churches and schools, directs agency to use common sense." She writes, Acting Homeland Security Secretary Benjamin Huffman announced the end of 2 directives in a state, giving agents more authority over whether they carry out enforcement and eliminating a legal pathway for migrants, or illegal aliens, seeking to come to the United States. The statement reads, "Criminals will no longer be able to hide in America's schools and churches to avoid arrest. The Trump administration will not tie the hands of our brave law enforcement and instead trusts them to use common sense." Alvarez writes, "It is a key example of how enforcement is going to be different under the new Trump administration from the Biden administration. Damn it," she thinks to herself. I'm adding that for a little bit of flair. Anyway, she goes on to write, "Immigration and Customs Enforcement set a policy in 2011 preventing agents from making arrests in sensitive locations. Why? The Biden administration put out similar guidance. I'll bet they did. Immigrant advocates have shared concerns over stripping that policy, arguing that doing so would stoke fear in immigrant communities, aka illegal immigrant communities, and keep children from going to school or people from seeking care at hospitals. Well, that's only going to affect people that shouldn't be here. Maybe they should go home." Anyway, she goes on to write, "The second directive includes the phase out of parole programs that allowed certain migrants to temporarily live and work in the United States. Why? These people should be going home." Unbelievable. Anyway, she goes on to write, "Republicans have repeatedly said that the Biden administration abused the parole program by extending it to multiple nationalities." Yeah, he did. The statement doesn't clarify which programs will be phased out, but says the program will be returned to a case-by-case basis, which is much more reasonable. Anyway, she concludes the article by finishing out the statement, which read, "The Biden-Harris administration abused the humanitarian parole program to indiscriminately allow 1.5 million migrants to enter our country." Migrants meaning illegal aliens, for clarity here. "This was all stopped on day 1 of the Trump administration. This action will return the humanitarian parole program to its original purpose of looking at migrants on a case-by-case basis." Now, what makes this turn of event even more interesting is just before this announced change in policy occurred, there was an incident at the inaugural prayer service. You see, there was a radical woke bishop by the name of Budde. Budde used her sermon as a way to directly attack the president. She used the opportunity to chide and scold him. Take a look at this.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God.
Look at
In
the
the name
way
of our
she's
God,
excited.
I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens.
If they're not citizens, they shouldn't be doing those jobs. If you have a society that requires there to be a semi-slave labor to make things work, maybe you got to change your society. What in the world are we talking about here? Oh, well, they may not be citizens. Oh, like, come on. What are we saying? It's no different than when the old Democrat states during the era of slavery, the slave states, tried to use the argument, well, who's going to pick the cotton if we get rid of the slaves? It doesn't justify allowing there to be slavery. And people that are here illegally are abused. They are underpaid. They are the underclass, a permanent underclass that we have been allowing to occur. How in the world can you look yourself in the mirror and say that is okay? A society should never rely on there to be an underclass that does the cooking, the cleaning, the picking of the crops. The hell are we talking about? Damn, this woman's crazy.
Or have the proper documentation. But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes.
If they came here illegally, yes, they are. You break and enter into a country, you have broken the law. By definition, you are a criminal. Sorry.
And are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here.
Now, Trump, in his usual style, didn't take this lying down. He fired right back at the good bishop, posting this on Truth Social. He wrote, "The so-called bishop who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning was a radical left hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone, classic Trump, and not compelling or smart. She failed to mention the large number of illegal migrants that came into our country and killed people. Many were deposited from jails and mental institutions. It is a giant crime wave that is taking place in the USA. Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was not very Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology." Now, of course, I have a few questions for the good Bishop Judd myself. Where is the compassion and mercy for the children whose parents are allowing them to be mutilated and transformed into looking like another gender than the one they were born into? Or where is the compassion and mercy for the thousands upon thousands of Americans who have been murdered, injured, and otherwise damaged by years of neglect in allowing millions upon millions of illegal aliens, criminals, to break into our country, to invade our border? Where is the outrage at the cartels, where they're human trafficking, their sex crimes and violent crimes, not to mention all the murders that they commit? Now, these questions are rhetorical because I'd argue that there is no compassion, because she views this country as evil. Because deep down, she, like all of her ilk, have a very real, very raw hatred for this country. She is part of the lunatic fringe who believe in the justification of hate groups like BLM and Antifa. She's the type of person who really believes the U.S. is a racist nation, that it deserves to be taken down a peg, that violence is justified upon American citizens. In fact, back in 2020, she openly supported BLM and Antifa's violence, their rage, their rioting. Here is the wolf in sheep's clothing, the very same bishop back in 2020 trying to justify the violence and accusing the U.S. of being evil. Take a look at this.
Why did you want to come out here and send
their message? It is a message of a call for justice, for swift justice for George Floyd, for systemic justice for all brown and black people who have been under the knee of this country in ways that we have witnessed time and again. This is wrong. And this rising up, this spontaneous uprising of people mostly half my age or younger, they're the ones we should be listening to.
And they're angry at the president.
They're so angry.
They're angry at the president. So what is your message to President Trump today?
Well, he should. I've given up speaking to President Trump. We need to replace President Trump. We need leadership that will lead us in the ways that this country deserves.
Thank you. Thank you.
So her passionate dislike for the country is obvious, and I'd wager that it is equally passionate in her hatred and dislike for President Donald Trump, both then, back in 2020, and now. And though there was much rejoicing from those who hate Trump on social media for her chiding him in public at the sermon, it all means precisely zero in the big scheme of things. You see, for the minority of those in the country who hate Donald Trump, it was great. They got to masturbate. Felt good for a while, but it didn't accomplish anything. And for those who don't dislike Trump, it's just another round of white noise. The never-ending hatred of Donald Trump, the constant lies, the misinterpretation has essentially stripped all of it of meaning. Just like the boy who cried wolf, the left has, over the past 8 years, accused Donald Trump of so many things that no one believes it anymore. No one seems to care. The Trump momentum will not be stopped by this, let alone slowed. The more he implements his agenda, the more his supporters will rejoice. People are tired of hearing that their country is bad, it's evil. People are tired of Orwellian censorship. People are tired of criminals being allowed to run rampant and without any consequence in this country. And this most definitely includes those who break the law by breaking and entering into the U.S. without our permission. Something tells me that the day of tolerating these endless criminal and evil behaviors is coming to an end. Of course, only time will tell.